Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and y'all hear that Mission Impossible music. I was going to start with some stories about Facebook and what's happening there, because not only are they in big hot water in the UK because of child pornography, child rape videos that they refuse to take down, but of course we've also got the calls from the former FEC member saying that we need to censor political speech. We need to be very careful about who is on Facebook. So they're censoring political speech, but they're not taking down very disturbing images there. I was going to start with that, but let's start, since we heard that Mission Impossible theme song there. You know, there was a story that came out of foreign policy, a very establishment, statist, globalist, CFR type of outlook that they have of the world. And they're talking about the CIA, and they say, mission unstoppable. Why the CIA is running America's foreign policy. And they said they've been running American foreign policy, and of course, we all happen to notice, actually, especially those of us here at InfoWars who've been talking about this for a long time. They've been running foreign policy since 9/11. You know, we had the coalition of the willing, or as I like to call it, the coalition of the drilling. We had people just hitting the mantra saying, hey, let's forget this. You know, this war is really about the free flow of oil at market prices. And it's like, yeah, okay, let's just call it the coalition of the drilling. We've been fed this kind of stuff before, and it's the CIA that is putting this policy through. It's a perfect headline, why the CIA is running America's foreign policy. One of the things I think is interesting, and something, of course, as we talk about the influence of social media on this last election, a big part of what happened was WikiLeaks, wasn't it? And now we're seeing a big pushback against WikiLeaks. Now, Donald Trump liked what was being put out, and he should have liked what was being put out. There wasn't anything wrong with telling the truth about Hillary's wars, what she knew, why we were going to war in Libya. We saw the emails where they're strategizing inside the State Department saying, you know, we can't put up with Gaddafi having a metal-backed currency. He's got enough money and he's got enough gold and silver that he's putting together a currency that'll be a regional currency that'll be backed by gold and silver. We can't have that. Can't have him going in competition with the fiat currency central banks of the West. So that's really the types of things that are going on in the backroom negotiations. You need to know that. We tell you that. And you can kind of intuit that. But you need to see the document. So it's very important that WikiLeaks put that stuff out. It's very important that we learned that the people who were hacking the election, who were hacking the Democrat primary, were the DNC officials and people like the mainstream media who were feeding Hillary Clinton questions in advance. It was very important for us to know that. Very important for us to know how they were rigging the election against Bernie Sanders. And so it was very important for us to see what WikiLeaks was putting out there. Nobody has said that WikiLeaks has put out anything false, because they haven't. What they put out was bona fide information. And to say that it was hacked is not even true. We've had former British ambassadors say, I came to the United States, I was handed this information by disgruntled people within the DNC. I tried to say some of that to the people that I would interview at the DNC in Philadelphia. They would have none of it. They would just look at me and almost put their hands over their ears, but they would yell back at me, no, it's the Russians, it's the Russians, it's the Russians doing this. And so they're implying that these emails were hacked. They're implying that the elections were somehow hacked. They weren't. What they're saying is, we didn't like the fact that you got this information, that you got the truth about Hillary Clinton. They didn't like that. So it's very disappointing to see Director Mike Pompeo, who they just had a replacement election for him in Kansas on Tuesday. On Thursday, he now hammered WikiLeaks, calling the organization a non-state hostile intelligence service. And I want to remind you, because I retweeted this on my account, I retweeted what WikiLeaks put out. They said, this is a tweet that was sent by CIA Director, now CIA Director, Mike Pompeo, on the 24th of July, 2016. And he, as a congressional representative, said, need further proof that the fix was in from President Obama on down? Busted. 19,252 emails from DNC leaked by WikiLeaks. So he liked it. He liked it when it worked for him. But now he says WikiLeaks is a non-state hostile intelligence service. Maybe it's the state that is hostile to intelligence, to the truth. That's the really sad thing about this. There was another release today from WikiLeaks of the Vault 7 series. First, they came out with Vault 7. I don't know if that had I don't remember if that had a keyword or not. The second one was Marble. Not Marvel as in the comic books, but marble like you know, the round stones that you play games with. That second release showed that, well, the first one showed that they were curating techniques to where they could do imposters. They could look like another agency, but they detailed that in great deal in the Marble release. And they showed how the CIA had the tools. We've heard, and of course, who have we heard this from? We have heard this, the source for all this information that the FBI is putting out, and Lee Stranahan tried to ask this question at Breitbart, and they wouldn't let him ask the question of Comey. You wanted to say, have you actually seen this stuff? Have you actually done the research? Or are you just taking the word of the people who worked for Hillary Clinton and the DNC on this? And of course, that was the answer. So you ask these rhetorical questions. When you're doing these interviews, it's like you're doing a cross-examination as an attorney. You don't ask questions you don't already know the answers to. And they knew that the Democrats are pushing this information out there, and Comey is pushing this out there, and he hasn't looked at this information. But what are they telling us are the fingerprints that tell us that this was being done by the Russians. So I said, well, obviously this was done on a Cyrillic keyboard, and it came from this area. Well, we all know this is pretty simple stuff that you can route things around to make it look like it came from anywhere you want it to make look like it came from. And even before this evidence came out from WikiLeaks showing precisely how they make it look like it's done on a foreign keyboard, done by foreign language speakers, we were talking to John McAfee, who said nobody in their right mind would leave their own fingerprints. I mean, if you're a Russian and you're hacking somewhere else, you're gonna put stuff in there to make it look like you're somebody else, like you're the Chinese or you're the Americans, and vice versa. The Americans have the tools to make it look like all the stuff is coming from China or from Russia or from North Korea or from Syria or whatever. They've got a long list of different states that they use as the usual suspects to make it look like it's coming from them. And so we saw that in the second release. Now, what we've seen in the third release that came out today, this one is, they're calling it HIVE. This latest batch of WikiLeaks documents exposes alleged CIA hacking techniques from Vault 7. The details how the agency can monitor its targets through the use of malware, how they can carry out specific tasks on targeted machines. This is a multi-platform malware suite. It has customizable implants for a lot of different operating systems. Here are some of them. Windows, of course. Solaris, MikroTik, which is used in internet routers, Linux platforms, a network video recorder operating system called AV Tech. They use that for closed circuit television recordings. They're even able to hide the presence of the malware and have it self-destruct. Of course, you know, Mission Impossible, right? This virus will self-destruct in just a little while, and that's what they do. That's one of the reasons, folks, when we look at this, the first takeaway we should take from this, and we're talking about hacking elections, the first thing we need to make sure we do is keep the computers as far away from the election process and the vote taking and the vote counting as possible. Yeah, we can report this on the internet, but the election machines should not be electronic in any way, shape, or form. And it's not enough to simply say that they're not connected to the internet. And in some cases, they're trying to let people do internet voting. We never can let that happen. Never let that happen. It will be the absolute end of anything that even resembles an election. And it's getting to the point now where they can, they've been able to manipulate elections for a long time, obviously. There is some chance at local elections where they're not interested in it. But if you put it electronically and you have electronic voting machines, they will turn the hacking of our elections by our own government into an enterprise solution. They will extend it down to dog catcher elections. That's where they will go with this stuff if you let them do this. So you have to keep this away. We have to go back to ballots that are paper ballots where we have humans of both parties sitting there watching and monitoring the counting and the custody of this and the transmission of these votes. We absolutely must do this. This explains this very well. They can hide malware. They put it on the HTTPS interface. And of course, that's what you have as kind of the backbone of the internet. They say it utilizes unsuspicious looking cover domains. so that you're not going to be aware that they're there. And, of course, it has the self-delete function. And that self-delete function we have seen over and over again used on voting machine hacks, where they put something on a little thumb drive, stick the thumb drive in the machine, pull it out, the thing messes around with the vote totals for the day, and then at the end of the day, it deletes itself, so you can't find anything there. We need to wake up to what's going on. And folks, if you think that this is making us safer, you're simply not paying attention. Because one of the key things that WikiLeaks has pointed out is that as they have exposed these different tactics, these viruses, these hacks, techniques that the CIA has done, the exploits, the holes in the security system that they're able to get through, we have the people who have defense contracts who are not the least bit interested in fixing it, like Google. Google is not interested. Others are. Others have corresponded with them. And they said, we're going to release a cross-tabulation and show you the people who are interested in fixing this and the people who absolutely do not want to fix it, because the CIA does not want it fixed. The CIA knew that they had lost their hacking toolkit, and they didn't tell anybody about it. So now you've got all these criminals throughout the world who have access to your banking account if you do it online. They have access to identity theft of yours. They can steal your identity. They can steal your banking accounts. Why? Because the CIA decided that they want to be able to break in and look at anything that you do, and they couldn't care less if you have a criminal who is doing the same thing. So they're going to leave you vulnerable. That's why this whole thing about thinking that you're going to trade your privacy, you're going to trade your liberty for security and safety, that is a fool's bargain, folks. Stay with us. We're going to be right back. We're talking about a little bit of Facebook, and we're going to have Kaya Jones at the bottom of the hour.
What the aging process is when the cell replicates, we lose a little bit of our telomeres. Telomeres are the little cups on the end of our chromosomes.
And when it runs out, you start dying. Secure your DNA force today at InfoWarsLife.com.